There is growing debate among Democrats on whether U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein should resign.
California Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein to step down are getting louder.
And now some Democrats are calling for her to step aside.
The Senate returns to Washington next week, still without its oldest member, California Senator Dianne Feinstein. And calls are growing louder for her to step down for good.
Big political story breaking tonight. Calls are growing among Democrats in California for Senator Dianne Feinstein to resign right now.
People are asking Dianne Feinstein to resign. And that's because she hasn't been to work in 2.5 months. You heard that right. She's a sitting U.S. Senator who hasn't been to work since February. February! That means she hasn't, at the time of this recording, April 18, 2023, been to work for 2.5 months.
The 89-year-old Feinstein has not voted in the Senate since February.
So, Lisa, catch us up on why Senator Feinstein has been out since February.
The California senator has been away from Washington for more than a month now.
Senator Dianne Feinstein has not cast a vote in the U.S. Senate since early February.
Can you imagine telling your boss you're not going to be at work for 2.5 months? Hey, boss, I'm sick. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, I'll see you in 10.5 weeks. Wait, what? That means that the people of California haven't had full representation, 40 million people, for 2.5 months. That's because Dianne Feinstein is sick. She has shingles.
She's been recovering from a shingles infection. That is something that normally isn't a problem, but it has taken longer for her to recover than usual. That happens with older Americans more frequently than others.
The California senator has been away from Washington for more than a month now as she recovers from shingles,
which is basically an adult version of the chicken pox. And the older you get, the worse shingles is. And make no mistake, Dianne Feinstein is old. And not just old for an old person. She's old for a senator.
Another layer here, of course, is the age of the Senate itself.
Yeah.
Let's look at where things stand. Right now, the current 118th Congress, the average age of U.S. senators is 64 years old. I looked at the Department of Labor. The average age in the U.S. workforce, 42, much younger. Another way of looking at this, a third of the current U.S. Senate is 70 years of age or older.
The average age of an American is 42. The average age of a senator is 66. Dianne Feinstein is 89.
Currently, Feinstein is the Senate's oldest member, but there are 6 others also in their 80s.
Turning 90 in June. Matter of fact, Dianne Feinstein is not just the oldest sitting senator, she's the oldest sitting member of Congress. Congress! She's so old she makes Joe Biden look young.
We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
No, but seriously, this normally wouldn't be a big deal. Old is what happens when you live a long life. And 90 is a life well lived if she were retired. But she's a U.S. Senator and will continue to be so for the next 2 years. That means she plans to retire at 92. 92! Can you even call that retirement? The average woman in the United States lives until she's 77. Statistically, she's not retired. She's with Jesus. Excuse me, what time is the vote on the Health Care Act? This is heaven. Besides the assertions of cognitive decline,
the assessment of Feinstein prompted the Chronicle to issue an editorial calling on Democrats to speak openly about her mental fitness, calling on her to resign if she's unfit for service. We invited Senator Feinstein on today's program, would welcome her at any time. With me now to discuss all this is Tal Kopin, Washington correspondent for the Chronicle, who co-wrote the original story. Tal, I'm going to put on the screen a paragraph from the piece which says this: 4 U.S. senators including 3 Democrats, as well as 3 former Feinstein staffers and the California Democratic member of Congress, told The Chronicle in recent interviews that her memory is rapidly deteriorating. They said it appears she can no longer fulfill her job duties without her staff doing much of the work required to represent nearly 40 million people of California.
There are a lot of unspoken layers here. The charge here is that Senator Feinstein is mentally unfit. I spoke to her the last week that she was here in February. It was a normal conversation. It was short, but normal. Other reporters have had different experiences. Notably, she did not seem to know when her retirement was announced.
California Senator Dianne Feinstein's mental decline was on full display during an interaction with a Democrat in Congress, according to the San Francisco Chronicle, as they prepared for a policy discussion in which the lawmaker said they had to reintroduce themselves to Feinstein multiple times during the interaction that lasted several hours. They said it appears that her memory is rapidly deteriorating, and it appears she can no longer fulfill her duties that require her to represent nearly 40 million people.
What makes this worse is that she's on a very important committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is responsible for appointing federal judges, including the U.S. Supreme Court. And that is very important. Remember Brett Kavanaugh? The Judiciary Committee. Remember Amy Coney Barrett? The Judiciary Committee. Remember the federal judge that wanted to single-handedly get rid of medical abortions and miscarriage drugs, misoprostol? The Judiciary Committee. As judges take a larger and larger role on issues from abortion to voting rights to affirmative action to environmental protections to, well, pretty much anything they feel like taking up, the judiciary is taking a bigger and bigger role in the everyday lives of Americans. So this is a very important committee. Matter of fact, there are 12 judges with lifetime appointments waiting to be voted on right now.
The new calls for her to step down are in part because of her role on the Judiciary Committee. More than a dozen Biden judicial nominations have been stalled, waiting for her to return.
The only problem? The Judiciary Committee has 11 Democrats and 10 Republicans, and the deciding vote is, you guessed it, Dianne Feinstein.
And it's not unprecedented for a senator to be out for 2 months, but what is unprecedented now is the math of this situation. Let's look at what it is for Senate Democrats right now. They hold the Senate chamber with a 51-seat majority. They hold the Judiciary Committee with 11 Democrats to 10 Republicans. That is critical because without Feinstein, that committee is at a tie. If it's a tie, Jeff, the Judiciary Committee cannot pass on any judicial nominations. And I don't know if anyone's noticed, but the Senate hasn't been doing anything else except for nominations. Democrats wanted to get judge after judge after judge on the federal bench. Without Feinstein, that entire thing is frozen.
So without her, none of Biden's judges can get through. Well, Biden can just replace her, right? Wrong. First of all, there's no real way to force a sitting senator to resign. Remember that little thing you learned in middle school called the Constitution? And how there were separations of powers? Yeah, well, there's that. Second, even though she's offered to resign from her committee assignment and to allow the Senate to replace her, in order to replace a member of a committee, Republican support is needed. And guess what? They ain't giving it.
Meanwhile, Republicans in D.C. are making it clear they are against replacing Senator Dianne Feinstein on the Judiciary Committee. The California Democrat has not cast a vote since February because she still is recovering from shingles. Her absence is holding up President Biden's judicial nominees, much to the frustration of the Biden White House and now publicly to many Democrats. Last week, the 89-year-old asked she be temporarily replaced after some Democrats called for her resignation. Senate Republicans say they will not let that happen, but for different reasons.
The Democrats are discussing the idea of trying to temporarily replace Senator Feinstein on the Judiciary Committee. Is that something that you'd be amenable to?
And they'd like Republicans to help them speed the appointment of more liberal justices. Yes, when hell freezes over.
Okay, so you're a no, I guess.
I'm a no.
Okay.
I don't imagine a single Republican senator is going to lift a finger to try and get more liberal judges appointed.
Let's start, Eugene, with the fact that Republican Senator and Judiciary Committee member Marsha Blackburn is now the second Republican to basically say she's going to block Democrats' efforts to try to replace Dianne Feinstein. And let me read you what she says. She says, "I will not go along with Chuck Schumer's plan to replace Senator Feinstein on the Judiciary Committee and pack the court with activist judges. Joe Biden wants the Senate to rubber stamp his unqualified and controversial judges to radically transform America." Do you see any scenario where Republicans relent on this issue?
I honestly don't.
So here's where we stand. A senator whose stubbornness has served her storied career well in the past is now well past her prime. And the same stubbornness that once served her is now disservicing a nation at a time when the judiciary has never been more important.
Tonight, we want to begin right here in Washington, where the Supreme Court.
A federal judge ruling to suspend the FDA's 2-decade-old approval of mifepristone. Then, just 2 hours later, a federal judge in Washington state ruling that FDA must keep the medication abortion on the shelves in 17 Democratic states and the District of Columbia.
We're a country convulsed by the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision.
It is a big week in the U.S. Senate for another major push by President Biden, this time to reshape American courts.
In the first half of 2022, America has had more than 350 mass shootings. Despite this, the Supreme Court ruled in June that a law restricting concealed weapons in New York was unconstitutional.
But what does this say about the country? As a nation, we've been here before. Remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the notorious RBG? Well, she was of the same ilk, an octogenarian who was asked to retire a number of times and refused with devastating consequences. We have to ask ourselves as a nation, is it time we built some mechanisms into our government that allow for the removal of officials if they are no longer healthy or competent? They do this in the military, in business, in sports, entertainment. So why not politics? Signing off. Peace. Hey, if you like this video, please smash that like button and hit subscribe. We would love to see you again. So take it easy. Peace.